everyone, welcome back to a buddy read with me, Jenny, and one of my online friends, Jay. We finished Trials of Apollo and went right into the Magnus Chase series, so I'm going to let you all know what my thoughts is on this series as I go through it. And yeah, I'm just gonna dive right in. So Magnus Chase and the Sword of Summer is the first book in Rick Riordan's Norse mythology inspired trilogy. And I felt like this book was quite a bit faster paced than Trials of Apollo, which is the most recent one I've read, obviously. But, yeah, it kind of starts out with a bang and just is action after action after action. While we do also get some really good character development, and we have some really good quotes. Like here's one about bone steel. To make steel, iron is smelted with carbon. Most swordsmiths use coal, but you can also use bones. The bones of enemies or monsters or ancestors. And so I just find that very interesting, and the fact that it's bone steel is the name gives it a little more gravitas than like Stygian iron and imperial gold, celestial bronze, as they are in other series. And I also like that this series does have magic in it as well, so it kind of involves that aspect of the Kane Chronicles along with the demigods of the Olympian series. So then we have, of course, in Norse mythology there's 9 worlds, and we are told the more frequently you travel between the worlds, the harder it gets. So I'm thinking that this is going to crop up in the later books, because while there is some world jumping here, there's not an extreme amount, I don't think. And of course we have the world tree, Yggdrasil, which being on it is not good for your sanity. And then when they go to the dark elves / dwarves area, they are told about how dwarf craftsmanship is. And so they're asking too, what is the name and history of a bar stool? And they say that stool is rear rester, crafted by Gonda. Once it held the tush of Master Smith Alvis. And I just find that very interesting, and then it's explained that, dwarves make something to last their lifetime. That chair was specifically made by that craftsman, made to last for his whole life, and has lasted longer, obviously. And then we have Blitzen's home, and he is a dwarven fashion designer. And of course, dwarves are usually about crafting, but not like textile crafting. And so it's rather interesting to see him. And then we also have Hearth, who is an elf. But he is a deaf elf who is learning rune magic, which rune magic is looked down upon now in the elves' world. And the fact that he's deaf means he's not perfect, so he doesn't get along with his parents very well. And then we have the wolf that binds Fenrir. They're making a new one, and the paradoxes that this new rope is made with is Wi-Fi with no lag, a politician's sincerity, a printer that prints, healthy deep-fried food, and an interesting grammar lecture. And when I first read it, the printer that prints part made me laugh so hard that I actually disturbed my dog. I don't know why I found that particular one so funny. I guess because of all the issues I have with my printers, that, they'll be fine, and then the second I really, really need them to print, they're not. So I just was like, yeah, that's very true. And then we have a description of Loki's breath. It smells of almonds, like cyanide. And I just feel like that describes Loki kind of well, because cyanide is something that is sweet but poisonous, enticing but poisonous, and that is basically Loki. And then we have Fenrir's Wolf. Says, you hear what you want to believe. You think your conscience is whispering to you when it is perhaps the wolf instead. So yeah, there's a lot of really good quotes in here. A lot of really interesting lore. And especially the fact that Magnus Chase is Annabeth Chase's cousin. I find this interesting that they were from different pantheons, and they're obviously going to have some crossover there because Annabeth is in the book. And yeah, and the ending definitely leaves it open for a very action-packed second book, and I'm extremely excited to continue on with this. I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. Like, I did enjoy Trials of Apollo, but I did feel like it dragged at some points. I didn't really feel like this dragged. So yeah, I will move on to book 2 and update when I'm done that. Hotel Valhalla is the guide for the Magnus Chase series, and I actually really liked this one. It actually does a good bit of retelling of the myths. It doesn't just kind of summarize them as some of the other guides have done. And so yeah, this kind of does that, and it gives a little brief biography of several gods. And yeah, it was interesting. It was probably one of the more enjoyable companion books, in my opinion. It's still not something that I think is 100% necessary to read for the series. It does add some background, but I don't know how much this really plays into the story itself, and I feel like you'd be able to understand it fine without reading this. But if you like Magnus Chase, if you like Norse gods, or if you're just a completionist, then definitely read it. And I feel like you should probably give it a try anyways if you are a fan of Riordan or even just mythology in general. And I'm going on to book 2, which is The Hammer of Thor, and this sounds like it's going to be pretty fun. One of the ongoing jokes between me and Jay is that if Thor ever met Chris Hemsworth, that there would be kind of a competition between them. And so I'm really kind of hoping that that happens in the book, that, there's at least some sort of thing where Thor knows who Chris Hemsworth is, and we just get, even like I love that guy, or why did they pick him to play me? Just to kind of get a feel for what it would really be like. So yeah, I'm going on to, as I said, the next book, and I will update you all later. So I finished Magnus Chase and the Hammer of Thor, and this was an interesting book. It introduces Sam's sibling Alex, and Alex is somewhat standoffish at first, and it takes he/she a while to warm up to everybody. Once Alex does, though, I really enjoy the dynamic everybody has, and I feel like Alex becomes a really good part of the group, and realizes that these people are trustworthy, and you get to see, a whole nother side of Alex, and, everything, and yeah. So I really enjoyed Alex after about halfway when you get some more character growth. And then we also get a lot of Hearthstone's background in here, and we get to see Hearth interact with his father and, be in Alfheim. And his father just really, really, really made me mad. And, just the way he treated Hearth was despicable. And I felt, really bad for Hearth. And I understand part of his father being upset. Hearth's brother did die. But that's not Hearth's fault. And his father just continuously blames him for it and just pushes all that guilt on him, and I just really wanted to reach in there and smack him. And I do feel like the third book is going to revisit this, because there is something left behind, and there's a loose thread as well with Hearth's father. So that was, rather a rather big thread, I should say, left open. And throughout this book, I really love the development of Sam and Magnus's friendship as well. I feel like they become really good friends, really learn to trust each other and everything. And another thing I did like was when we go to the Giants again, that we have a reference to the song Pinball Wizard, and I have now had that stuck in my head for the past 2 or 3 days since I read that reference. And yes, I have listened to the song, and no, it did not get that song out of my head. It just keeps going through my head, and I just thought that whole scene was really well done. The whole scene in the Giants club, they have to outsmart the Giants, and the Pinball Wizard is part of it, and just the way that was worked in, I absolutely loved. And then we also meet the God of Vengeance, and he is extremely gentle and caring, and like Hearthstone, he is mute, so he uses sign language. And I feel like, again, there's going to be more interactions between Hearthstone and the God of Vengeance, just because, it seems pretty obvious that Hearth might want vengeance. And just the fact that they seem to click so quickly just leads me to think that there may be a lot more to that. And one overriding question I have is that Asgard has been empty. It's been mentioned in the first book. It was mentioned a couple times in this one. So what the heck happened to all these gods? And I kind of really, really, really want to know that. And then there was some pretty fun quotes here. And Magnus has an alarm clock. It is a small gold Mjolnir trophy that wouldn't stop singing until I grabbed it and threw it against the wall. And Magnus says, I have to admit, that was a satisfying way to wake up. And that was actually pretty funny. Then we have when Hearthstone gets runes from Sif, who is, of course, Thor's wife. She gives him runes written on wood, and she says, runes written on wood carry different power than runes written on stone. They're full of life, full of suppleness. Their magic is softer and more malleable. And rowan is the best wood for runes. And we don't get to see a whole lot of these runes used in this book. But again, I'm really sure this is going to be a pretty big thing in the next book. And then she continues, and she says, one rune is missing, just as with your other set. When any letter is absent, the entire language of magic is weakened. Someday you will have to reclaim that symbol to reach your full potential. And so I feel like that's going to be very hard for Hearth to do because of where his lost rune is. Yeah. And then we have, this is just a funny quote, that Magnus is kind of like talking to himself. And so he says, get out of my head. My brain refused to get out of my head. Inconsiderate brain. And I don't know why I found that so funny, but I really did. It's just kind of that little, unexpected laugh that's there. And then we have Sam and Amir, who are both Muslim, and they're talking kind of about how they have reconciled the Norse gods with their faith. And so they meet Heimdall, and Amir says, Allah may have 99 names, but Heimdall isn't one of them. And I just feel like that kind of fits in with, how Sam feels as well. The Norse gods aren't truly gods. They're just more powerful beings. But there's still one God, like, above all. So yeah, this was definitely a fun book. And I am excited to get on to the third one and kind of see how everything is all tied up, especially with the ending that we have here. And we get to see Annabeth and Percy in the next book. So it'll be interesting to see how, everybody comes together, and if we get any Greek gods in the next book, being as we do have Annabeth and Percy. But yeah, so I'm going to start on the third book, hopefully here shortly, and then I will report back. So I finished book 3 in Magnus Chase and the Ship of the Dead. And in the very beginning of the book, there is a scene where Annabeth and Percy are helping Magnus train for his battle against Loki, and his sword Jack gets to meet Percy's sword Riptide, and we find out Riptide is a female sword and is apparently quite attractive, and Jack is an interesting character anyways, and this was just another pretty amusing little escapade there, little scene. And then we have a really good quote from Alex Fierro, and he says, "You have to flaunt the weird, my friends." And Percy says, "I'm going to quote you on that." And Alex says, "Please do." And I just find that, again, extremely, funny and quirky. And you know what? You flaunt your weird. Why not? And I completely agree with Alex's, idea behind it. And it is kind of interesting that, the more they flaunt the weirdness, the godship, their powers, the less people notice them. So that's where that came in, and that's pretty amusing as well. There's actually one thing I forgot that was mentioned in the first book. Magnus is left-handed. When he was in school, I believe he said it was kindergarten or first grade, his teacher didn't want him to be left-handed. You can force yourself to be right-handed. And so she literally tied his left hand down. And yeah, I don't know how that slipped my mind from the first book, but it did. And that was kind of brought back in this one. And one thing I did like is when Alex and Magnus went to Magnus's uncle's brownstone and they went into the library, we find out Alex is a book lover. He's going through the shelves and you find out that he likes like Sylvia Plath because some of her books are on the shelves. He's like, oh, cool. And then he sees Ursula Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, which is a book that I'd really like to read at some point. And I always enjoy characters who enjoy books. So that was fun. And really, the only complaint I have about this is that this whole series was leading up to this big battle with Loki. And then when they finally meet Loki and go to fight him, it's over in like 2 pages. And I feel like it should have been much more difficult. There were other things in the book that I felt like were more difficult for them to do. And it felt more rewarding when these characters, overcame those things, such as when Alex made her ceramic warrior and fought the giant's ceramic warrior with it. Like, I felt like that victory was much more earned. So yeah, overall, I did like the series. And right now, I only have 1 book left, and that is 9 from the 9 Worlds. So I will be reading that, and that should be a quick read. I believe it's less than 200 pages. So I will be reading that and letting you all know my thoughts on it. And I will see you then. So I'm now done with the Magnus Chase series. I finished 9 from the 9 Worlds, and this is a short story collections. There's 9 short stories. Each takes place in a different one of the 9 worlds and is narrated by a different character from the series. And I did enjoy this. Again, like a lot of the companions, it doesn't feel like it's absolutely 100% necessary to understand the series, but I feel like this does give the characters some more depth, and it's a fun little way to get back into the world. And I also like the fact that Thor is on a jog throughout the 9 worlds, so everybody sees him in each of the stories, and he just goes jogging by. So that was pretty funny. And I do enjoy that this also has some color plates in it of the 9 worlds, and we also get the 9 characters who tell the stories. Each of them gets a portrait, so that was fun. And I do have to say my favorite story was probably Alex's, set in Muspelheim. And I feel like that one really hints that there could be a lot more to come in the Magnus Chase series. But it also kind of brings it to a close enough that, like, I don't necessarily have unanswered questions. It kind of fits in with what we already know about this world. And it's just kind of like one of the things that is ongoing. So yeah, all in all, I do recommend this if you enjoy the series, and I do feel like it can kind of be read at any point in the series as well. So I'm now done the Magnus Chase series, and overall I do recommend it if you like Rick Riordan books. I do recommend you start with Percy Jackson, just because I feel like this kind of builds on that a little bit. You don't get as much explanation of how the world works. And I mean, yeah, it is a little different than Percy Jackson, but not only that, you do get cameos from him, so I feel like you would enjoy that a lot more if you've read the Percy Jackson series. And yes, that's everything I have for you today. And as always, if you like this video and want to see more, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time back in the book cave.